Hello there, let's look at how to design a Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. Now, I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons so long that when I first started, there weren't even character sheets at all. It was just a piece of paper and you wrote a few words on it. But for a long time now, character sheets have been about boxes. Boxes to put your information in. And so I took a piece of paper and I drew a bunch of boxes. And when designing those boxes, I started in Photoshop and I made a whole bunch of kind of Art Deco, fantasy-esque boxes. And I used the symmetry tool to make sure they were, well, symmetrical. For your information, I just used 3 brush sizes. They're all just standard, solid, black lines. I use them at 12 point, 6 point, and 3 point. The main exterior lines are all at 12 point. The interior kind of curvy lines are at 6 point, and eventually you'll see some 3 point lines. Once one box was designed, it was simply a case of multiplying it by 6, lining them up, and then putting some text in it. Now for the ability score boxes, I wanted to put 2 circles in there. The bigger circle is for the main modifier, +1, 0, +4, all that. And the smaller one are for the actual ability scores. For the next lot of boxes, I wanted something different from the ability score boxes, so using the symmetry tool, designed something else. Again, 12 point lines on the outside, 6 point for the fancy bits on the inside. I experimented a little bit more, but didn't like it, so went back to what I had just before. Now for the armor class box, tried and true, I went for a shield shape, and then put some curvy lines in the middle, and then it was simply a case of lining them all up, making sure that they're exactly the same height as the ability score boxes, duplicating them, lining them up, and they're all done. And the font that I'm using is called Amarante, which I think is perfect for a Bard Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. By the way, this character sheet is what I call a display character sheet. It is going inside a book, and it represents the main characters in a Dungeons & Dragons show called The Bards of Aratai, linked down below. The main implication for that is it doesn't need a whole bunch of stuff that you would normally need when you're playing. Like, it doesn't have life-death saves, it doesn't have a whole bunch of breakdown of small money boxes, that kind of stuff. It's really big picture stuff. Speaking of big, the next thing were the 5 big boxes that hold most of the text information. This is for features, spells, skills, equipment, and attacks. Similarly, as before, use the symmetry tool in Photoshop, use the 12-point pen for the outside line, 6-point pen for the smaller decorative lines, and then the same font Amarante for the heading of each box. The character portrait in the top right-hand corner is an important part of this display character sheet, so it's given a lot of real estate. And so there we go, there's the core black and white design. Now it's time to make it fancy. I really didn't have anything specific in mind, so I experimented with a whole bunch of shapes and concepts before settling in with putting some items in there that represent the bards. At first I was trying to freestyle and I thought, heck, what am I doing when I can just trace? And now you'll see where the first of the 3-point lines come into it. The strings on this, well, it's supposed to be like a lute or something, but I've turned it into a ukulele because it only has 4 strings, and the character above, Zozo, plays a ukulele. Then it was time to get nasty and put some weapons in, starting with daggers, well, because they look cool. So after using the symmetry tool again with the smaller brush sizes, got one of those, duplicated it, switched it around, and we got a couple of daggers, and then it was time to put some magic-y swishy things, and it changed brushes completely. For these magical swishes that you see that are going to appear throughout the character sheet, I changed the brush completely to a variable brush size that is thicker when I push on the Wacom tablet pen, and thinner when I push lightly. Wanted to trace a couple other major items that really signify these bards. One is this masquerade mask that you can see here, and just before you might have noticed that there was a big mall at the bottom. That's because one of the characters in this show, one of the bards, uses a mall. Doing magical signs is really fun. A couple of little crosses and a couple of leaves makes a massive difference. Some thorns here and there, and all of a sudden, when you lowered the opacity to about 40%, you get pretty cool looking stuff. Now, potions are an important part of the story of this Dungeons & Dragons series, and so it was only right to have a potion on the character sheet. I then spent quite a bit of time looking at magical swirls around it and other places on the character sheet. And to be honest, I think I just overcooked it. Did a whole bunch of things, but it was just too much. So ultimately, as you'll see, I got rid of it. Because this is a display character sheet, I really wanted to put some texture behind it. And wow, doesn't this parchment texture really make it pop? The next step was to take all of the graphics elements, put them in their correct folders, and then drop their opacity to 50%. This really makes the most important parts of the character sheets, the numbers and information, pop out in comparison. So next, it was time to move on to actually entering the information to see if the character sheet worked at all. So, putting the name, class, race, and background, all that kind of crucial stuff, and entering the stats. I was a bit worried that the ability score numbers in the attribute boxes, you see that 9, 14, 12, etc. I was a bit worried that they were going to be too small, but they actually look just fine. The next bit, which takes a little bit of time, is just entering all the specific information about each character. A lot of Dungeons & Dragons character sheets are 2 pages at least, with all those spells and background and lore can be 3, 4 pages. But this is a display character sheet, and so all of the crucial information needed to be on 1 page so that the audience, when watching the series, could see everything at a glance. 4 hours later, a brand new custom character sheet is finished with the key information at the top, detailed information at the middle and below, with some nice graphical elements to keep interest up and make the thing look pretty. If you found this video interesting, hit us with a subscription, share it with your friends, and check out the Bards of Artai series. The link is in the video description below.